putting in the chat for us. We will hopefully be able to answer them and move forward. Our goal with these Friday digests, even when they're on a Tuesday, is to provide you with the information, the inspiration, and the actions to get engaged in the legislative process and the electoral process. Our agenda is driven by what you need and your interests. So please keep us informed about how we can be helpful to you. Don't hesitate to contact us with suggestions, and the easiest way to do that is the survey that we will send you after this Friday Digest. So with that, we're going to be talking about the 2026 legislative session. As I said, it ended last night at midnight, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And we're going to start out actually by having a little bit of fun today with you as participants. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean to introduce the Wheel of Legislative Numbers 2026.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everyone. So what we're going to do, Kim, is we're going to get that wheel up on the screen here if we can, and then we're going to give it a spin. What we're going to do is going to use those numbers to begin a discussion about this year's legislative session. We're going to spin the wheel, and whatever number the wheel lands on, we're going to guess what that number represents from this year's session. And we're going to have the answers in the chat, so I invite everyone to join us in playing. So once we spin the wheel, we'll put the answers in chat, and you can guess which one of those answers is correct. So let's go ahead and spin it for the first time. And we get 60. So our possible choices are the number of delegates in the legislature, the number of bills that passed this session, or the number of people who attended Maryland LCV's second annual lobby day in February. So we'll give folks a few seconds to kind of ponder that, and we'll see what the answer might be. We have three choices. Many of our folks who are very familiar with the legislature can probably figure out what this answer is just by the process of elimination. So why don't we go ahead and guess? Kim, the correct answer is the number of people who attended Maryland LCV's second annual lobby day.
Right. There are 141 delegates in the House. So we knew that wasn't the right number, but we had 60 people. Yep, there you go. 85% of you got it right.
All right, excellent. All right, let's give it another spin. Okay, 2.5 million, 2,500,000. What are our possible answers there? I think we might need to go spin it again. Let's close that one and spin it again. Let's remove that one and spin it again. There we go. Thank you. Okay, 900. 900. So 900 is the number of Maryland LCV members and supporters who took action on data center related legislation this session. That's the first possible choice. The second possible choice is the number of amendments filed in the Utility Relief Act. And the third possible choice is the number of windows in the State House. So I can tell folks that when we were out and about yesterday, marking the occasion at the end of the legislative session, we did walk by the State House, and we gave a quick count, and we came to the conclusion pretty quickly that there's no way it could be 900. So that one's out. And the Utility Relief Act, which we will be getting to a little bit later, had quite a few amendments. But did it have 900? Not so sure. So the correct answer is the number of people who took action on data center related legislation, which is a topic we'll be getting to later in this webinar. So, and 83% of folks recognize that. Great. So let's close this one out and give the wheel one more spin. And just barely 4,420. All right, this one, here's our choices. The number first is the number of actions LCV members and supporters took on all issues regarding this session, the number of steps from LCV's office to the State House, and the number of bills filed this session. So let's give folks a minute, a few seconds here to consider that one. Kim, what's your guess on this one?
Well, my guess is the number of actions LCV members and supporters took this session.
Okay, I have a feeling that you might be on the nose. Let's see what the correct answer is. It is indeed the number of actions, and 2/3 of our members and support, and 2/3 of our folks who are joining us got that correct. So that's very encouraging. So let's give it one last spin, if we could. We'll get to the main part of our webinar today. She goes, and the 50, even number. Okay, here are our choices. The number of senators in the legislature. And that's the first choice. Choice B is the average number of people who watch Friday Digest live. And the last option is the average number of pages in the bills proposed this session. So let's give folks a second or two to kind of come up with an answer. And we have some help from one of our policy folks regarding amendments to the Utility Relief Act. It was 32. And the correct answer here is which, Kim?
The average number of people who watch Friday Digest.
And I'm happy to say we're above the average today, which is great, especially considering we're talking about such important stuff. So with that, we're gonna close the wheel, and we're gonna move on to kind of get into the meat and potatoes, as it were, of the legislative session. So Kim, we'll get into the details next, but can you kind of give an overall assessment and a feeling on how you think the legislative session went from an environmental perspective?
Yes, I can. It has been a session of ups and downs, which is fairly typical during the session because you're making great progress. You're doing things exactly right. You're getting good feedback, and then opponents come in and offer amendments or offer opposition that is insurmountable. So that up and down and up and down has really been consistent this year. But this session was pretty unique because it started out early on with the governor, the speaker, and the president all speaking to the importance of affordability, and that Marylanders were being hit from all sides because of affordability issues. A lot of stress from the federal actions that are occurring, as well as the economy and jobs, etc. One of the ways they tackled the issue of affordability this year was through energy affordability. And that's what the Utility Relief Act was about. We're going to talk about that in depth. In the end, what we did is we tried to, everywhere we could, ensure that clean energy is how we spoke about energy affordability. It's clean energy, renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy that's out there. So why don't we promote it? Why don't we advance it? And in the end, we're really pleased with some of the actions that bill included that helps the deployment of clean energy. So in that way, it was good. We overall, the affordability was a big part of it. We were disappointed in not getting the Cherish bill through. We'll talk more about that in depth. And yet, there was probably more in-depth conversations about environmental justice than we've ever had. And we're going to count that as a step forward and a step where progress was made. So overall, we are feeling pretty good about the session and the outcome, and looking for a few days off here soon.
So thanks so much for that, Kim. Coming into the session, Maryland LCV had 4 priorities, all of which we talked about at one point or another over the course of this year on Friday Digest. 2 of those priorities were addressed in the Utility Relief Act, which we mentioned we're going to talk about a lot today. And just a reminder, Utility Relief Act is this massive piece of legislation, an omnibus bill that rolled up more than a dozen other proposals. And Power Maryland Forward, which is one of our priorities, was addressed in the Utility Relief Act. Can you help folks understand what that looked like within the context of that legislation?
Yeah. So we've talked about Power Maryland Forward before with you guys on Friday Digest, and it is an umbrella organizing tool for us, if you will. And it's really about how we think affordability should be addressed in Maryland, how Maryland moves forward by powering clean energy. It includes three provisions. One is utility accountability, one is clean energy deployment, and the other is energy assistance. And for each of those, the Utility Relief Act had elements within it that really advanced each of those three components of the Power Maryland Forward rubric that we've developed. Starting with utility accountability, we were very pleased that there's we got a 1 year moratorium on what's called forecasting rate making, and using what the utilities did was to forecast out years ahead and develop our rates based on sometime in the future versus what is occurring right now. And we got a pause on that. The Public Service Commission is going to do proceedings that looks at how we can build guardrails around that system and hopefully keep it in check. We were hoping to actually fully eliminate that forecasting provision, but we did get it delayed for a year. So that's a near-term win, and it's something that we're going to have to come back with next year. The other aspect of in the Utility Relief Fund Act, under utility accountabilities, utilities are now required to participate in PJM governance. When they voluntarily join PJM, we would have to pay for that as ratepayers. And what the bill says is there's no volunteering. You need to participate in PJM, and you need to do it because you're that's part of your job. So we don't pay for that. There's some ratepayer transparency improvements that make sure customers are really informed about what's happening with their rates, how they're where their public engagement opportunities are, and oversight. And then lastly, a big one was the executive compensation guardrails, so that ratepayers are not paying for exorbitant bonuses or salaries for executives. That was some guardrails were put around that. So under utility accountability, we were really pleased. Clean energy deployment, the second part of our Power Maryland Forward agenda, is preserving the Public Service Commission's authority over gas system planning. And that's a big one because the Public Service Commission really plays an important role in that. So preserving that authority there was a big thing. The other thing that happened under clean energy deployment was we worked really closely with the solar industry and got some permitting streamlining processes in place that helps, and will and also authorize the deployment of plug-in solar. So if you live in an apartment, you can get a small solar panel system and plug it in and have solar power there, which is a great way to address clean energy and some affordability issues. The
Great.
last aspect of the Utility Relief Act that is under the Power Maryland Forward is energy assistance. And this is where the legislature really leaned in a big way. They There's a program called Empower that we all pay into each month. It's on your bill, depending on how much energy you use and where you live. That Empower surcharge is there. It's used to for energy assistance programs and for energy efficiency programs. So it helps households become much more energy efficient. The cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. So that's really important. there was some early efforts to just eliminate Empower, that program. Fortunately, we fought those off, and the unfortunate part of the bill is that they changed the um, greenhouse gas reduction targets that Empower meets, and but temporarily they're going from 2.5% to 1.75% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. We were sorry to see that, but they will ramp back up again. So a bit of a compromise there, but the program still is intact, still operating, still plays an important part. Um, and the other thing about energy assistance is that we are very pleased is expands the Public Service Commission's oversight on underground transmission and promotes advanced transmission technology. So these are ways to make energy uh, more readily available for people. It will mean we use less energy, hopefully, and be smarter about how our grids function. So those were some aspects of the bill that we feel were very positive.
Great. Thanks so much, Kim. Another one of our priorities that showed up not only in the Utility Relief Act, but also in the budget was safeguarding the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. Can you talk a little bit about the safeguarding the SEEP, as it were?
Yeah. The Strategic Energy Investment Fund, just as a quick reminder, there's two sources of funding. One is alternative compliance payments. So if a utility can't reduce their emissions, then they pay. So it's an alternative compliance through issuing paying into the fund. The other is the RGGI proceeds that we gain as being part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So those two sources of funds are generating a lot of revenue. Somewhere north of 700 million this year is coming in on the SEEF, the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. What we argued for this year were two aspects of the SEEF. One is to make sure that at least for the 2027 budget that they apply the same amount of money, at least the same amount of money as they did last year. Last year it was $376 million went to energy programs from the SEEF. We said you have to do at least that. Happy to report that the General Assembly approved $100 million above what Governor Moore put in his budget originally. So we are north of $400 million for those energy programs, which was really an achievement for 2027. We were uh, uh, disappointed that the other aspect of this that we tried hard to get was to have a permanent commitment to strategic energy investment funds going to clean energy programs and to support the agencies that put those kind of programs in place. And we could not get that in to the final bill. The House put in some great language and we couldn't get it through the Senate. So we were disappointed in that. But the SEEF remains a strong funding source for clean energy programs, and we were really glad to see that the funds are in there for 2027.
Great. Thanks so much, Kim. Now, as we mentioned, the Utility Relief Act was an extremely large bill, and it had a lot of information about data centers, which is a really hot button issue for many Marylanders and for folks all over the country, actually. What was in the legislation about data centers that we've learned since it was
Yeah,
passed?
the bill did some great work around data centers, and I'm really pleased because over the last few years we are getting legislators who are experts on data centers, and they're really learning about them and how they operate and working with companies that are bringing them and looking at what other states are doing. So Maryland is doing a good job assessing the situation with data centers. In this particular bill, there's a strong accountability framework for data centers, and they really define the definition, making sure that data centers are regulated and that the initial size that was under the law has been reduced. So we're going to be addressing even smaller data centers. And the other thing that was great is there's an incentive program for data centers that use clean energy, that bring their own clean energy. So ratepayers are not paying to for the energy that they're using, number one. And number two, if they are using clean energy, there's incentives in terms of the permitting process and whatnot that the state does to support the development of data centers. We thought that was a very positive step, and hopefully we'll get the data centers that are coming to Maryland to really think through how they are powering the data centers and what it means to be a data center in Maryland.
Right. I'm sure that's not, we'll be hearing a lot more about data centers in next session. So
Yeah.
finally, on the Utility Relief Act, there were some questions, given the size and the scope of the bill, about transparency and how such a major piece of legislation was given not much room for public debate. So can you talk a little bit
Mhm.
about that?
Yeah, um, for the second year in a row, the legislature took a number of other bills and combined it into one big bill. In this case, 15, 16, 17 other bills were compressed into this one. So either parts or all of 17, 18 other bills were put into the Utility Relief Act. Um, there were hearings on those other bills. We put in testimony. But as it came together, there we were frustrated with the lack of transparency about exactly what was going in. We felt that there was not a great chance for discussion and debate from all sorts of stakeholders, including us and including you. And but truth be known, we didn't see the bill until yesterday afternoon. Sine Die, 196 pages of in the bill, which is a lot to consume. And as Kristen put in the chat, there was 32 amendments that was offered, a lot of debate on it. Um, it's not a great way to legislate, and we are hoping that having done this for the past 2 years, that the leadership realizes that that is not the most effective way to get really good policies through, that probably bite sizes are better than the whole smorgasbord on the table. So yeah, we've let that they know how we feel about that. And we'll be encouraging them to really look at that process moving forward.
Right. Okay, we did have two other priorities when we started the session that we haven't mentioned, and we want to get to those. The first one is Cherish
Yeah.
Our Community Act, which we put a lot of effort into, not just this year, but in years previous with a big coalition. So I know you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the Cherish Act, and again, for those of you that were with us all session, was a bill that uh, gave MDE the authority to consider cumulative impacts in permitting decisions for those communities that are underserved, overburdened. So these are communities that have high pollution burden, and year after year, decade after decade, frankly. And we've, along with the coalition, for sure feels that the best way to move forward is to look at what's happening around the community, not just one permit at a time. Very complicated issue. Uh, a lot of concern about um, making sure that the needs of the communities were met, which is a top priority. The opponents came out in a big way, which I think uh, shows the power of the community and the coalition that was working on it. Very concerned about extra costs that might occur to them, and also just the uncertainty for business developers. That message resonated with legislators. We unfortunately could not get all the issues resolved. We made a lot of progress in coming to agreement on certain aspects of it, but in the end, we just couldn't come to an agreement on what should be in this year's bill. So it did not move forward, and we lost it. If you won bills based on hard work and passion, we would have taken it across the finish line, but often that's not the case. And in this one, it wasn't.
Yeah. And our last priority was, of course, the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act, which we went down to the wire on the final day, and kind of update, if you can update us on where that stands and what happened there.
Yeah, really unfortunate. This was one that kept some of us up till midnight last night, kind of hoping that it was going to get through in the end, and it didn't. It got far. It got out of the House again. It got out of the Senate committee. We could not get it off the Senate floor in time. A lot of work on um, getting the senators to understand what was in the bill, how it benefited them, their constituents, and frankly, the clock struck 12, and we ran out of time in terms of getting that one through. A great group of coalition members that worked on it, really strong. Did I think everybody feels very proud about the process and the um, uh, compromises that were reached, the understanding that was achieved, and hopefully it'll make next year's efforts a little bit easier. But we just ran out of time on that one.
Speaking of time, I want to let folks know we're getting close to 12:30, which is when we usually will do things up in Friday Dive. But this time, for this particular webinar, we're going to allow a little bit of extra space to make sure we touch on everything. And did you want to mention anything about the budget, Kim, before we move on to questions?
Yeah, the governor's budget came out, and then obviously the House and Senate worked on it and passed it through. And we were, as I mentioned, the Strategic Energy Investment Fund investments were great. We got an extra 100 million from the legislature for those programs. The Maryland Clean Energy Center got over $20 million for investments that they leverage and then put back out into the community. That's a huge achievement for all of us. So we're very proud of that. And the agency fundings were pretty much flatlined, so they remained stable. And in this day and age, with a $1.5 billion deficit, a lot of financial pressure on the state, a lot of federal money missing, so that had to be made up. We were really pleased with stable funding for the agencies. So overall, we're giving that a thumbs up.
Great. Let's move to some questions. Thank you, everyone. We did get quite a few questions. Patrice and Evelyn, I hope we addressed your questions about the data centers and the size and scope of the Utility Relief Act. If we haven't, please let us know. Marie and Abby, we're going to talk about elections in a moment and kind of the season to come in our endorsement process. We did have a question from Dedra about what environmental protections were passed beyond climate in this particular session, Kim.
Oh yeah. So yes, we talked a lot about the climate and energy, which when you have a 196-page bill, that's how that goes. But there were some other bills that did pass relative to land and water. And of most significance was House Bill 925, the sewage sludge bill. And this is really important because it puts in strict limits on the level of forever chemicals that are in sewage sludge. That sewage sludge is used as a fertilizer on farm fields and yeah, spread on fields. So really important to set that limit on the sewage sludge. Really pleased to see that through. The other one was the Chesapeake Bay Enhancement Program. And historically, the port via the Transportation Trust Fund would pay a couple $1 million to the state for the oyster replenishment program, and that money stopped for a little bit. We got it going again, and so we're very happy that the funds will be there for DNR to replenish oysters that are harvested. We are going to have some work next year because we want to make sure that DNR can use that money for oyster restoration as well, not just oysters that can be harvested. So we'll work on that next year. But really happy that some oyster money came through for DNR.
Great. We always have some work to do next year, right?
Yeah.
So for our speaking of next year, leading into next year, for our last segment, we're going to talk about elections. And while in one sense, the end of the legislative session happened yesterday and part of that work has ended, in another sense, our work is really just beginning because we have elections this year, and that provides an opportunity for people to support our work and help elect environmentally friendly candidates. So the things that came really close this year, we can get them over the line the next time. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you have in mind with our endorsement process and this coming election season?
Yeah, so you know, our work is year round. We're going to take a couple days off after session here, but then we're back at it, and it's an election year. So we work really hard to determine who are committed and committed conservation elected officials that believe in the same values that we believe in, are willing to partner with us, willing to work, and are savvy enough in terms of politics and raising money and whatnot that we look at that list, we talk to them, they fill out questionnaires, and then we decide if we will endorse them or not. Do they look like a candidate that we feel will deliver on the actions that you're asking for, that their voters are asking for in terms of conservation, and will be good partners? So, and they are, it's plausible that they can win. So it's a fairly complicated determination on who we endorse and how we endorse. It's a board decision, it's not a staff decision. So our board actually reviews all of that and then determines who we're going to endorse. So we have an ongoing list of endorsed candidates. You can go to our website and see who we have endorsed. We're going to have some more coming out, and we will work with them during the off year outside of session time. Some of them have a big race for the primary, which is June 23rd. Others will have a race for the general election, which is November 3rd. And we are very much involved in that. So stay in touch with us on this. If you want to, it's important to vote, period. Regardless of who you vote for, it's critical you vote.
Mhm.
Elections have consequences. We believe voting for conservation oriented candidates is the best thing for Maryland and Marylanders, and we want to help enable people to make good choices as they vote. So consider us a partner as you look at your voting choices, and let us know how we can be helpful on that.
Thank you so much, Kim. And I could not agree more with everything you just said there. So thanks to everyone for joining us today. That's all we have time for. We thank you not just for joining us today, but throughout the year and all of our Friday digests and for supporting us throughout the legislative session. If you don't already, we hope you follow us on Facebook and on Instagram and sign up to our email list. Speaking of which, we will have a deeper dive coming out soon with a review of the legislative session that really gets into the nitty-gritty of the issues. This was the last Friday Digest of the legislative session. Thank you to everyone who joined us this year, as I said, and keep an eye out in the coming weeks for conservation conversations. And in the meantime, as I said, we hope you sign up for our emails and follow us on social media. We'll be gearing up for the primary election season and on June 23rd, and in the fall, of course, in the general election. Finally, we invite you to fill out our short 5-question survey, which should be in the chat. And we want to thank you, not just today, but for all your support throughout this legislative year. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody.